considerably classier venue than these pictures usually played. I remember seeing a lot of these pictures in theaters where you had to actually move from seat to seat during the picture just to avoid the people you were sitting next to. I'd like to bring out two people that I'm very interested in Mario Bava, one of whom was actually a friend of his. Producer Alfredo Leone produced Baron Blood, and the picture you're going to see next, Lisa and the Devil. Alfredo? Sit right over there. And also, I'd like to bring out the publisher of the video Watchdog, and Mario Bava fanatic and completist, and author of the only known book about Mario Bava that, to my mind, has ever been written, which will be coming out this fall, Tim Lucas. The picture you just saw, Black Sunday, was actually made under the title Mask of the Demon. Very common to Bava's pictures, it was not released in America in the form in which it was made. You have to sort of think back to the period that these pictures came out. In the 1960s, there was actually something called international cinema, which we don't have anymore. But it used to be very common for movies from all over the world to be distributed in America, often in Americanized versions such as this one, but at least there was actually a market where people could see what was being made around the world. Mario Bava's successor, Dario Argento, has had pretty bad distribution problems with the pictures that he's made, and Mario's son, Lamberto Bava, has actually, I don't think, ever had one of his pictures distributed theatrically in the United States at all. And I think part of this is due to the fact that the business has changed so much. There just seems to be much less interest in films from overseas unless they're strictly art pictures. And as a result, we really have very little idea of the kind of pictures that are being made for domestic consumption other places in the world. That wasn't the case in the 60s. You really got a sense of what was popular entertainment in Italy and Germany and France and other countries, because they would actually come over here in dubbed versions. Mario had a deal with AIP. This was his first picture. I wish my first picture was as good as this picture. And AIP, of course, was basically in the teenage business, and so this picture, which actually exists in an export version with considerably more literate dialogue than this, was sort of dumbed down in the dubbing. When the title was changed to Black Sunday, they figured they had to get as many references to Black Sunday into the picture as possible. And as a result, the dialogue, which was, as you see, spoken in English, was considerably sort of simplified, which results in some of the kind of stilted dialogue that you hear. But this was very common in international co-productions. The script would be written in one language and then translated into another for the actors to say on the set, and then again retranslated in America, often to very strange effect. Anyway, Alfredo, your dealings with Mario began when, would you say?
Actually, in 1968, Mario was shooting a film called Four Times that Night. And they had probably about 5 minutes of footage. And one of my partners had invested in the film. I went abroad and I met Mario for the first time. And he convinced me to complete the film, which we did. And that began our relationship. He was just a magnificent human being. He was a great man. And from that, we went on, and then we did Baron Blood. Baron Blood was really not Mario's cup of tea. He really didn't want to do it. And then we worked diligently on the screenplay, and I convinced him. And I took him out of Italy. He didn't like to leave Rome at all. He didn't like to leave Italy. And we went to Austria, and we shot that outside of Vienna. And that was really one of his greatest thrills, and it was a great success. And Sam Arkoff released that AIP in those days, and wanted all of my and Bava pictures because we had a great relationship. But Bava said he had never had the pleasure of doing a film without having to worry about the dollars. For once in his life, he'd like to make a film without any limitations on it, within reason, of course. And I said, okay, Mario, you go ahead. He says, really? Yes. And as a result, he did Lisa and the Devil. And that was the birth of the film, which, of course, is a great film, as you will see, I hope. Hope you'll enjoy it as much as we did making it. And actually, a lot of Lisa and the Devil came from the fact that his father was a sculptor, and he used to make, as you know, Tim can fill you in a lot better than I on that. And the idea was born out of our set dresser and our art director. When I first saw the story outline, I really was not wild about it. I had lots of difficulty convincing our Spanish co-producer and our German co-producer. When the film was completed, it was customary for all the producers in Rome to send the prints to the other producers. Carlo Ponti was hosting Elizabeth Taylor and Burton in those days, and there was lots of publicity on the film, and he asked for me to send the print. We did over the weekend, and Carlo called me Monday morning, quote, he says, Leone, why are you making this a picture? Just from there, we went on to the Cannes Film Festival, and we had to continuously book the theater, the Paris Theater in Cannes. Packed. Had no buyers. None of the foreign buyers would buy the picture. And the rest, I believe, is history. And from that came, as you know, House of Exorcism, which I had no option in doing. And Mario was very upset over it. He really didn't want to do it.
We'll get a little more specific about that in a minute. Tim, in your researches, what kind of a guy was Mario?
He was a very quiet and retiring man who was very serious about his craft, but not especially particular about where he worked. He was able to take any script that was offered him, and he tended to accept it out of kindness. You know, like he was too embarrassed to say someone's script was unworthy of his time and attention. So he would take it on, and gradually, by storyboarding it meticulously, he would do a sketch for each scene and basically rewrite the script in visual terms, because he was not an articulate man. He was very visually oriented, and he would make it his own. And the one thing that I think has been the most interesting thing to discover from doing the research on the book is that I always had the sense from seeing his films that they were very artistic. You can tell that there's a great visual style in his films, that he is very well schooled in techniques of all the different eras of filmmaking. His father, in fact, was a silent cameraman. Eugenio Bava was the cameraman who did Quo Vadis, the first feature film. And Eugenio left the business to become the head of the special effects department at the Luce Institute, which he did for 30 years. Eugenio retired from the Luce Institute the year that Black Sunday was produced, and he began working part-time with Mario. He sculpted all of the wax heads that you see in the film. He sculpted the bronze devil's mask in the picture, and a lot of gruesome things that you don't see in this American version, like the staking of Crouvaillon's eye, and heads in the fireplace and things of that kind. But Mario learned from him a great deal, and the more that I found out about Mario's own personal life and the work that went into his pictures, I really got a sense that this is not only a man who was technically competent, but he was an artist who expressed himself through his work, no matter what his work was. And I think that's a great achievement, considering what he had to work with.
The budgets on the majority of pictures that Bava did were quite low, and he was forced to be very resourceful in his special effects training. managed to kick into a point where Planet of the Vampires, which I think is a picture that you'll be seeing if you have a ticket, is a picture that takes place entirely on another planet, and he basically had 2 rocks to work with. And everything else is done with mist and fog and colors and foreground objects. You'll probably noticed in this picture there's a lot of foreground stuff, and in some of his later pictures, like Danger Diabolic, there are instances where entire sets that appear to be there are actually done with mirrors and small miniatures. He was extremely versatile in this regard, and partly it was born from the fact that the pictures just didn't have very much budget, and there really wasn't a lot of stuff available to him. In the case of Lisa and the Devil, to get back to Lisa and the Devil, which is a very you might say arty picture. There apparently were no buyers at Cannes because the picture is, I think, the only film, one of the only films that Bava ever completed of a sort of a personal nature that wasn't completely re-edited at the time that it was made. However, when the picture failed to sell, a couple of years later, it was bought by AIP, and they decided that since The Exorcist had just come out, that what this picture really needed was an exorcism. So they went about re-editing the picture that you're going to see, taking out lots of stuff and adding some new scenes, which actually Mario did shoot several of, although not all, involving Elke Sommer getting an exorcism from Robert Alda, who's not in the version that you'll see tonight. The most famous sequence from that version is the spitting up frog sequence. You see, it's too horrible even for the microphone. Which actually is kind of cool, but is really, really terminally stupid. And there is some. I think Mario. There are some scenes that allegedly Mario refused to direct because he didn't approve of the profanity. That was, of course, you can't make an exorcism movie without a lot of sniffing your socks in hell or whatever it is they say. And unfortunately, that's the version that has been handed down. Briefly, I remember when I was working at Film Bulletin, which was a trade magazine in the early 70s, Lisa and the Devil was listed on the Allied Artists schedule as a picture that was supposedly going to come out. But to my knowledge, it never played any American dates at all.
Well, actually, what happened there, without authorization, they made a dual tax shelter deal. It was Allied Artists that sold Lisa and the Devil. In those days, in order to qualify for tax shelter, they had to release the film in so many theaters. So what they did is they made posters, they paid the theater owner, and they opened it up in probably Oshkosh, I don't know where, in 5 little cities, and they never really played the film. Then they played it on television, and I shut them down. I would not allow it because they cut it and they froze it.
The TV version of Lisa the Devil was quite interesting. It has there's a lot of violence, a lot of people getting killed in it, and so what they would do to save money, because they didn't want to actually have to remix it, they froze the frame every time somebody was about to kill somebody. So you would hear the soundtrack of people being battered to death, and there would just be a shot of a cudgel, frozen. People are very resourceful in ways to save money. It's particularly, unfortunately, with this kind of film, which only until recently has ever gained any kind of critical reputation. And so in fact, I understand that this picture came within just seconds of not existing at all. The negative of that this print was made from apparently was found just right next to a negative of 4 Times That Night, I think, which is another Bava picture, which actually had mold and stuff all over it, and that this picture was on its way to not existing until this particular negative was found. Also, Kill Baby Kill, which is a picture that's playing a little later in the cycle, is a new print off a negative that, again, I think was just rescued from oblivion from the German version, which was The Dead Eyes of Dr. Dracula, was the title in German. I recommend that because not only is the picture impossible to see in a decent print, but this is the original Italian version with export version has Italian titles, and I think it's a little bit longer than the version that was released in America. Any more about Lisa, which we're about to see, or?
Lisa is, I think, Mario's most personal film. You see a lot about him, and as Alfredo said, you can see the influence of his father, because the film is peopled with statues and wax mannequins, and you can really tell that he was feeling his oats as a filmmaker when he made this picture, because it followed a long period of inactivity for him and making some rather bad films. And another thing that you have to remember is that Black Sunday was made as his first feature film when Mario was 46 years old. So he had actually completed a 30-year career as a cinematographer in Italy before making that picture. So 20 years later, when Lisa and the Devil came about, he was facing the fact that he had better make his masterpiece or fold up his cards and go home. And I think he really plays an excellent hand in this picture. And it's his most serious film, and I think that that's why its defeat at the film festivals, its inability to reach an audience, threw him into a kind of cynicism that his career never recovered from. He died less than 10 years later, at the age of 66, in 1980. So it's a very important picture, and I'm glad that it's been recovered.
Yeah, I think one of the things that may have thrown people off is that it's not strictly a horror film. It's really kind of a fairy tale. It's got sequences in it that are quite magical, and of course, being the kind of international co-production that it is, it's the kind of movie. I used to think that if these pictures had been released with subtitles instead of dubbing, that a lot of people might have said, "Oh, well, look, this is sort of an interesting director," as opposed to, being dumped on double bills with The Amazing Transparent Man, which tends to reduce your critical expectations somewhat. Of the other films in the festival, we are running tomorrow Blood and Black Lace, which is sort of the forerunner of I guess the stalk and slash pictures that followed, although it's considerably more artistic. The print that we're running is a Technicolor print. It's a 16 millimeter print, because nobody seems to be able to find what happened to the 35s, of which there must have been quite a few, but I don't know where they all went. The problem is that, of course, the violence level in these pictures is considerably higher than most television stations will allow, and so the problem becomes trying to find a print or several prints to combine to try to get the most intact material out of, and the print is the most intact 16 millimeter print that I've ever seen, although there are still a couple of shots missing, which will become all the more apparent. If you're interested in seeing the original version of Black Sunday, it is available on tape under the title Mask of the Demon. Mask of Satan from Sinister Cinema, and it's a pretty good tape. The quality's not bad. It has a completely different music score. One of the AIP things about these pictures is that as the Italian-American connection got a little better after the success of this picture, there was a lot more input on the part of the American partners as to what the content of the pictures was going to be. And in some of the pictures actually exist in dual versions where the Italian version is quite a bit different than the American version, but they're actually all made by the same people. So, as far as film history goes, it becomes kind of difficult to try to catalog these pictures, particularly when so many of them are inaccessible, and these pictures really haven't been seen theatrically, and since the times that they came out, and most of them, when they did, were buried on triple bills with zombie movies and things. So it was pretty tough to find them. Any last words?
I'd like to say something. First of all, as you were saying about the rarity of the prints, I just want to commend not only you, but also a fellow in France named Carlos Silva, who's responsible for saving the negatives of Lisa and the Devil and Kill Baby Kill. And there's an archivist in New York named Alan Upchurch, who was responsible for supplying many of the prints that you're seeing here. And without the work that these men have been doing, these films would be impossible to see in 35. And I just wanted to salute them. Also, I have a message that was sent to me by Lamberto Bava, Mario's son, if I can open it. Lamberto asked me to tell you my greetings to the audience at the American Cinematheque. I'm very glad to know that my father's work is being honored at this festival, and I wish I could be with you, but I'm stuck in the editing room completing my own new movie. I am happy to announce that my next project will be the completion of Mario's only unfinished film, Cani Arrabbiati, Wild Dogs, which I hope you will be able to see sometime next year. It is the most realistic film ever made by my father. The entire story takes place inside a moving car, and it is told in real time. My deepest thanks and best wishes to you all. Lamberto Bava.
Let's see, what's the time situation? Oh, anybody have any questions?
What language was Barbara Steele actually talking on the set? It seemed very close to the English dialogue as opposed to people speaking Italian.
Right. I think you'll find in many of these films that most of the time people seem to be speaking English, but when their lips don't match, it's usually when the dialogue has been rewritten for whatever various hundred reasons that there may be. One of the most fun things is in Blood and Black Lace, which has a lot of characters in it. The costs that they wanted to pay for dubbing these pictures, they didn't want to pay too much money because they were getting them for a bargain. They hired the same actor, Paul Frees, who is a very famous voice actor, to dub about 5 characters. So there are several scenes in the picture where Paul Frees is actually talking to himself. And if you're at all attuned to the pitch of his voice, it's quite. You could just imagine the madness in the dubbing room as they were trying to, Now, which one will you be?
All of the voices in Black Sunday were done by people who later worked on Speed Racer.
Which is a shame because the voices in the other dubbed version, the Italian export version, are English actors, and the dialogue sounds a lot classier and a lot better.
It's true.
Can you tell me something about the movie Hercules and the Haunted Temple?
It's about 85 minutes. Are you a Reg Park fan? Well, Steve Reeves is the poor. Reg Park is the poor man. Steve Reeves.
It's basically about Hercules. His wife becomes entranced under the spell of an evil character played by Christopher Lee, and he literally has to go to hell to find a golden apple that will restore her to her senses. And the movie is. I've seen this print. I saw it in San Francisco at another Bava retrospective earlier this year, and it's the most colorful film I've ever seen. It really makes MGM musicals look washed out. It's the colors like radium.
I think you'll find in the prints that are in Technicolor the incredible superiority of that process to what we have now.
The sets in Black Sunday are very elaborate, and I assume they weren't built before Black Sunday. Were they standing sets in the Italian soundstage, or were they left over from some
No, they weren't. As a matter of fact, they were all built on Titan Studio sets for Black Sunday. The producer of the film, who was basically rewarding Bava for helping to complete a film that Jacques Tourneur walked off of, called The Giant of Marathon, wanted to make this film in color, and Bava refused, saying that it was a black and white subject. And so they took the money that would have gone into color stock and basically put it into the art direction and camera equipment. No matter how good Bava's later films look, this is actually the only film he ever made that actually had first-class camera equipment. It's the only film he actually had that had a real crane on it.
My question is, if his films, when they were shown in the States, when they originally came out, was sort of classified with, like, zombie movies and that kind of stuff, how did he gain the attention for being, like, a noted director or an artistic director? I mean, how did that come about?
Well, it came about rather late, and in fact, he was sort of surprised. He professed surprise later that anybody knew who he was.
people like me who were in film school or college, and I know Marty Scorsese is a big fan, we used to go see these pictures as a matter of course. I mean, I went to see all the AIP pictures partly because they had a lot of interesting things in them that I didn't find in mainstream movies. The pictures that Roger Corman was making, the Edgar Allan Poe pictures, seemed to be at the time much more adventurous than a lot of the pictures that were, gaining critical acclaim. And the interesting thing about these kind of pictures is that some of the more acclaimed movies tend to fall by the wayside as the years go on, and some of the films that were kind of reviled in their day. I can think of The Searchers and Touch of Evil as two pictures that were certainly considered kind of beyond the pale psycho even when it came out. It was roundly criticized as Hitchcock at his worst. And it's sort of comforting to those of us who make movies now to know that, the critics have their say, when your movie comes out, but actually the work is the thing, and as the years go by, if something has merit, it sort of pops to the surface.
Yes, he did. He had good command of the English language. Yes. However, he didn't flaunt it. He pretended. He used it to his advantage frequently. But he spoke fluent English.
Okay, last one. If I could rhapsodize about Barbara? Oh, Barbara really could rhapsodize about herself much better than I worked with Barbara Steele on a picture called Piranha, which I was in my Roger Corman days thinking that when you're making a movie every day, you think, well, this will be my last movie. I'll never make another movie after they see this one. So the idea was to try to fit as many people that you ever wanted to work with as possible into a movie. So there was a part of a scientist that was written for an actor, and we decided that, maybe we could get Barbara Steele, maybe we could talk her into it. And Barbara, to my amazement, said yes. And I would, of course, constantly ask her about Mario Bava and her horror movies, which is, I found out, is not the way to her heart. And although she had many fond memories of Mario, whenever I would talk about her horror movie career, she would just throw back her head and go, "Oh, God," in that sort of wonderfully actressy way that she has. She was really very sweet, and I think a little perplexed by her, by being known primarily for making horror films, which I think that Volker Schlendorf's picture "Young Tourless" is the picture that she really cared about making, and she was also in 8½, but people tend to forget about that stuff and remember Terror Creatures from Beyond the Grave. It's sort of perplexing to her. Anyway, we have to wrap this up, and I hope you enjoy Lisa the Devil. It's really a very unusual chance to see this picture. And thank you, Alfredo and Tim.
Thank you very much.
You.
If you could please exit the theater. People with weekend passes, please stay, and I will be around to check those. But everyone else must exit the theater. Thank you.
Mr. John Phillip Law.
That was your seat, but okay.
All right.
No, it's okay. I'm good at this. Here, you could have one. There's a knack to this emceeing thing. I haven't got it yet, though. Well, this picture was made in 1967 on the heels of the James Bond movies and revivals of other superheroes. There was a Fantomas picture made in France, but there's only one Danger Diabolic, although it was a very successful comic strip. How did you come to get involved with this picture?
Well, let's see. I've done a number of films in Rome. In fact, I didn't. The first picture I did as an adult actor was an Italian film called High Infidelity, and this was 6-7 years later by this time. But I was over there doing a spaghetti western called Death Rides the Horse, And I had met Jane Fonda on Hurry Sundown, and she and Vadim decided they wanted me to play the angel in Barbarella. So at that time, I was actually over there living with them out in the Appia Antica, on a place called the Villa Vasarati. And I shot Death Rides the Horse, Danger Diabolic, and Barbarella, and The Sergeant all back-to-back, actually. And that means, I'm sure you know what it means, about 1 day in between. I have one shot of myself in my diabolic hairdo with my wings on from Barbarella. They were trying to get the wings to fit. And as a matter of fact, my hair all practically fell out after that because they dyed it black so many times, and they tried to get it back to a natural color to match my wings in Barbarella, which I decided to go with natural color wings instead of white wings. And it turned out my hair wouldn't hold any color after that. It was coming out by the handful, so it's just that's why I was kind of a towhead in Barbarella. But I happened to be there for that reason, and Barbarella was a Paramount film, and so was Diabolic. And when I went to see Mario Bava, I boned up on the comics to the best I could, and went in there and gave him a look like that, and he said, Diabolic. Okay.
This picture was produced by Dino De Laurentiis. Did you have any dealings with Dino? Did he make you an Italian dinner or anything?
No. Well, yes, as a matter of fact, he did make me an Italian dinner. But
one of his specialties.
That was later on. Yeah, that was sometime later up in Monaco or someplace where we met up. But I'm sorry you didn't get to see a picture of Marisa Mel in the clips here, because she was my Eva Kent. And I thought she did a good job. I started the picture with two other actresses before Marisa. The first one was maybe that's better. Can you hear me? All right. The first one was a girl, I don't remember her name. She was a model and a kind of a protege of Charles Bluhdorn, and a very, very attractive girl, but not very experienced actress. And Mario wasn't happy with her, so. Since I was hanging around with Roger Vadim at the time, he was instrumental in getting Catherine Deneuve to come down. And we started the picture for a second time with Catherine Deneuve and shot about a week with her. And then Bava was still unhappy that the chemistry wasn't going right. So he always wanted either Mary Lutolo or Marisa Mel from the beginning. So we wound up with Marisa Mel, and it turned out very well.
Did Dino say, Johnny, I want you to be in my picture, Johnny? Dino was doing very big pictures at the time, too, and so this was a pretty high-profile movie.
Well, I'll tell you a good story about Dino. He called me up to the office one day, and which was rather rare. He was a very hands-on producer, and was always down to the set, but I didn't know what he was calling me up to the office for. And I get up there, and he, big, very impressive office. He and Otto Preminger had the best offices of all of them. And he came out from behind the desk, came running over, and he fell onto his knees on the carpet right in front of me, and looked up, and he said, Johnny, you got to help me. And I felt like the Pope. I was going to say, rise, anything you want, And I said, well, yeah, you know what, and he says, I can't finish the film. I said, really? And he said, no, I've got to have a week from you. He gave me this whole squeezy story about his budget and everything. And son of a gun, if in about 3 minutes he didn't earn more money than I did as an actor in a week. So I think he was probably one of the best actors. I think Italians are mostly all natural actors anyway. But I think Dino was one of the more highly paid actors.
The finished film incorporates a lot of trick shots. It's rumored that Bava finished the picture so far under budget that there was room for a sequel. And a lot of the stuff is foreground miniatures and glass shots. Were you privy to a bunch of that stuff?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I was continually amazed by Mario's expertise in that area, because if anything, we'd go out and choose a location, and if he didn't like something about what we had, he would just call for a sheet of glass and a couple of magazines and cut something out and put it up there, and and we'd go ahead and shoot. There was one. Yeah, there was the scene, I guess, where I'm going to rescue Ava after I jump out of the plane with the helicopter and dump Adolfo Celli and all that. I go running up this hill, and we had a cabin he didn't like, so he just took a piece of glass, cut a little cabin out of a Camel's ad or something, stuck it on there, and put the 3 steps and a platform. He says, just go running up there and go walk up those steps, pretend like you're knocking on the door like this, listen, and then go in. So I did it, and then all I had to do was step forward and be masked behind this little piece of paper, and that was it. And another instance, when I was watching the rushes with Dino one night, I kind of slipped into the back and I was watching him, and he was up front, and he viewed this scene where I drive into my cave, and it looks like I'm going up an elevator and along a wild kind of a platform, so it's like a bat cave kind of a deal. And all I was actually doing was climbing up a ladder and walking along a catwalk. And the whole set, we stopped for about 3 days shooting, and I went over to see what was going on. I said, what, did we stop the picture or what? He says, no, Mario is doing his work. And Dino said, so I went to, well, when I came to work, he said, well, come on up here and look at this. So I went up behind and I looked through the camera, and he had it set up so he could just pan the camera from one side to the other, several pieces of glass he'd worked on for days. And it looked exactly like I was going up in an elevator and moving along this conveyor thing, and Dino was in the front at the rushes, and he says, I'm going to tell Paramount this set cost $200,000.
You'll see a lot of, we're not unfortunately showing the whole picture of Danger Diabolic, but there's a lot of the same effects work in Planet of the Vampires, which you're going to see, which is another picture that was made for $1.98 on a big soundstage, and a lot of the planet itself that you'll see the actors walking on are pieces of glass that have been painted, and 2 rocks that Mario used to claim that he made the whole planet out of. He was sort of exaggerating a little. But there's a lot of really ingenious trick work in the picture that of the type that for some reason isn't done anymore. How about climbing up the wall that we just saw?
Climbing up the wall. Well, the wall wasn't exactly straight up and down, but as you can probably tell, but it was an angle about like that, I guess, something like that. It's funny. I just used a pair of those things the other day to move a mirror.
Kept them. Didn't tell Dino.
Yeah. I did keep my costumes. I had those costumes for a while.
Those are. If you've seen the picture, or even in this clip, I mean, the costume is really cool in this movie. And you said it was made out of.
Well, that costume that you saw there. That was a kind of a one-shot costume. That light-colored one, that was supposed to match the wall, so I could go up. But my normal costume was black, and I had a rubber mask and a leather costume. It was really made by one of these fine glove makers. A wonderful glove leather costume. And it's floating around somewhere. But I had we had a lot of costumes in that thing, a lot of costumes and a lot of adventures, a lot of experiences, and I'll give you one more story. When I jumped with a parachute, we set that thing up on a flatbed truck. The idea was I was supposed to, jump out of the plane holding Adolfo. I grabbed Adolfo Celli with me and leap out of the airplane and then threaten him with dropping him all the way down until he tells me where he's got Ava stashed. And so the initial shot where I jump out of the plane, we laid the camera, put the camera on its side, shooting this way as though we were shooting up. We were shooting in a horizontal plane, and we had one of those wind machines that they used in the Bible. It was the front end of an old P-51 Mustang that was cut off and just they used it for windstorms. And all morning when we were out there to shoot that day, they were trying to start this thing, and they had me hooked up to a harness tied onto this flatbed truck, and I'm wearing the parachute harness, and it's out behind me, so they wanted to just miss the truck with the camera, so you'd see the canopy open and billow out. And the guy spent about 2 hours in the morning trying to get this old airplane engine started, and everyone was getting more and more frustrated, and then all of a sudden the thing kicked, and by that time everyone was so happy and he was so happy that he finally got it going. He'd been sweating bullets, this special effects guy, And he had a pair of earphones on, earmuffs, so he couldn't hear anybody telling him to stop or anything. And he just gunned this thing, and it grabbed the parachute, and it just stretched me like a rubber band, adjusted every vertebrae in my back. And I was sitting there going, it didn't look very much like I'd fallen out of an airplane. Anyway, we finally got that thing right, but just the funny things that we did in those days, it was amazing. There weren't many stuntmen in Italy in those days, so we do. A stuntman in Italy in those days was just a daredevil, somebody who'd do anything for a buck. And I only recall seeing a double one time, and that's when I dove off of this thing into the harbor, a crane, and I remember I wanted to do that so badly myself. I said, "Oh man, that guy looks like a sack of potatoes. Come on, let me do it." And he said, "No, you can't jump in that water. You get an ear infection or something."
And if anybody has any questions or answers, even.
Well, that's a kind of a general truth about almost every film done. I don't actually recall. I remember the first time I saw this in the States was a 16mm print, and I remember being very disappointed that a lot of things had been, it was a rent-a-print, and just so many frames had been cut out by everybody who rented it, I guess. It felt that they could at least snip a couple of frames here and there and for something. So it was pretty hacked up, but I don't remember specifically. I don't think it was any big smash. It got a release. It was a Paramount film, and it became it had a kind of a classic status. I should say cult status for a while up in San Francisco. I remember I was up there, and one little Cinematheque said that they had been running it every weekend like Rocky Horror Show, every Saturday night, and people were coming back to see it. But other than that, I don't think.
Actually, it was, I think, released as about a year after it was made as the second half of a double bill with another picture.
Okay.
This isn't the Bava question, because you did such a good job at Sinbad and local Sinbad. Was there ever any thought of doing another film?
I would like to very much have done another film. You never know how or why those things go, because I think that perhaps they just wanted to. They didn't want to establish any actor as Sinbad, because they'd had Kerwin Matthews and then myself and then Patrick Wayne and although I'm proud to say that my Golden Voyage of Sinbad was far and away the biggest success of all of them, and it cost about half what Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger did.
Okay, one more, and then we can wrap up.
Well, a little bit of both. At that time I didn't speak Italian very well, but I was starting to catch on because I'd done a few films then. I'd worked there off and on already for about 5 or 6 years in Italy. So I understood enough Italian that I could get by. And it's funny, as an actor, I've never had any trouble communicating with a director or a fellow actor, even if neither of us spoke the same language. I mean, I've worked in Russia and places. I did a scene in Bulgaria where 5 languages were spoken in the same scene. Bulgarian, German, Italian, French, Russian, English. Because we tried to shoot in English, and the poor Bulgarians couldn't get their mouths around the English words, and they would lose all their acting talent, And finally I said, "Oh, come on, just stop this nonsense here. We can do a great dubbing job. Let's just let him shoot in Bulgarian." And bang, the whole scene came alive because we knew what we were doing. And it's the same thing between a director and an actor. You get to kind of draw a beat on what you're doing. And very early on in the film, when I started finally with Marisa, and Bava was finally happy, he said, "Oh, listen now." He says, "I'm a dog of a director, but I'm a good cameraman. Now you guys got to help me, And he was such a politician and such a wonderful guy, and so he put the actors so much at ease that I really, he was a great loss, I must say. I really mourn his loss to the industry.
Well, thank you, John. The next picture
Thank you all very much.
Next picture is Planet of the Vampires. The print that you're going to see is a 60 millimeter print. It's a television print, but it's brand new, and it doesn't have anything cut out of it. At least it's the American release version. The title on it is Demon Planet, and the dialogue ranges pretty much from "Let's get out of here" to "Let's get out of here quick," as you'll see. But visually, it's really pretty impressive, and there's a lot of stuff from Alien that was originally done in this picture. So, hope you like it. And also an actress who worked with Mario Bava in at least 3 pictures. This film, in which she played the maid who's looking on the police line before the guy has the epileptic seizure. One of my favorite moments. Also, she's has a substantial part in What, the next picture that we're running, and also was seen briefly at the end of episode 1 of Black Sabbath. You may remember her as Madam President in Death Race 2000. Harriet White Medin. Hi. Just before we start, we have another celebrity in the audience I'd like to have stand up. You may remember him best as Dr. Carrington in The Thing, the original Thing, Mr. Robert Cornthwaite. Bob did me a big favor last year and took a small part in a picture I did last year called Matinee, and I'm very grateful. Well, I guess the question that they all ask you is, why 3 pictures with Mario? How did he? Were you one of his favorite actresses?
I doubt that. But why 3 pictures? He gave me a job 3 times. I took it.
So you lived in Italy at the time.
Yeah.
And were in a lot of Italian films.
Yes, I was. I left New York in '46 to go over there to play the nurse in Paisan, the American nurse, Harriet White, the girl who ran across Florence and Rome and the whole boot of Italy during that time in that film. And I was supposed to stay for 3 weeks, and I stayed for 21 years. Story of my life.
What brought you back?
Well, my husband died, an Italian husband whom I had married, and he died, and things were different. The difference in Italy from 46 to 67, when I came back, was, incomparable to believe, hard to believe. And things got tough there too. First we were the angels of mercy, we, the Americans who arrived and took care of everything with the Marshall Plan and all that sort of thing, and put Italy on its feet. Then once Italy was on its feet, they didn't need us so much.
Gee, that happens all over.
Story of our lives, isn't it? Anyway, but that's how I came back. That's why I came back.
So, Tim, would you like to expound a little bit on the place that this particular film, Blood and Black Lace, has in the overall scheme of the Italian? I don't know how to pronounce it. Giallo film?
Yeah, this film was the first horror film to really fully define what the Italians call the Giallo series. The word Giallo comes from it's yellow, because the mystery novels in Italy that were published during this period all had yellow jackets. And so when these novels were adapted for the screen, they took on the nickname Giallo. This movie is very X-rated stuff for the time it was made. 1964. It's still, I think, an extremely brutal film. So much so that American International, who was distributing all of Bava's work at this time, actually passed on it. And as a result, it's the only one of Bava's films from the early part of his career that showed up in this country virtually intact. Because AIP was always tampering with them so that it wouldn't upset the children who made up their audience. There are still a couple of shots that don't survive in this version, notably a shot of the woman's face being lifted off the stove, which we're somewhat grateful for. But a lot of people hold this still very highly and say that it's still the stylistic masterpiece of the Giallo form.
So, Harriet, in What, or I guess it was called The Whip and the Body when you made it, I understood that was a difficult picture to make, that the weather was very cold, or something. Or perhaps this is an apocryphal story.
Cold and blustery and, windy, I remember. I remember very little about it. It's a good many years. But it was tough. It was tough.
About how long would a film like that take to make?
3 weeks, maybe.
Hmm.
He was a fast worker, wasn't he?
Yes,
Yeah.
he had to be.
Yes, yeah.
The print of Blood and Black Lace that you just saw is the most complete version that we could cobble together from several different prints. As Tim points out, it's still missing a couple of shots, notably the first time that the woman gets the that claw hammer or whatever it is in her face at the beginning, and also there's a scene where one of the women gets her head knocked against a tree like 12 times, which doesn't appear to be in the print, but somewhere out there's a complete print, but we haven't found it, obviously. And the print of What is not quite as advertised in the brochure. It's certainly the most complete version around. It's the original version that was released in America, but I don't think that you could reasonably call it the entire picture, because there's some nudity, I think, that's has been edited out of this print.
I think no real nudity, but flogging scenes. The movie is the story of a sadomasochistic relationship that continues beyond the grave. And there are just some whipping scenes that went on for quite a while and reached a point of erotic fervor, and it was toned down with an axe for the American market.
Harriet, did you have a personal relationship with Mario Bava in any way, or
No,
I didn't mean that kind of relationship. I meant a personal relationship.
Well, he was kind of he was very, very thoughtful, very thorough, very businesslike. He knew exactly what he was doing, what he wanted to get. And he didn't shoot a lot of film, extraneous and stuff that he didn't use. He was very careful, quiet, sympathetic man. There were no rages like there had been with, what's the fellow's name? Ricardo Freda. Yes, he used to arrive on the set every morning, and you never knew what was going to happen. Like a raging lion. But it was very pleasant to work with Mario Bava.
When was the last time you saw him?
What was the last film I did with him?
I guess was this one.
This one.
Yeah.
And that's, no, that was before, I think. That was before. I hadn't worked with him when I met him at the De Laurentiis studio in the Basque Valley. But he was a nice little man. Nice. I was very grateful to him for giving me these funny little jobs. Wasn't very much to be done in this one, but pacienza, that's the way it is.
Anybody have any questions?
Did that young man address me? I didn't hear a word.
He basically asked if if it took a long time to set up the lights and camera moves, and
I don't think so compared to a lot of the other cameramen that I have worked with over the years. No. I think he knew what he had to be done, and he did it very systematically and expeditiously. I don't think there was a great deal of time wasted at all, which is probably why he worked, you know. I mean, he must have been a good director that didn't cost millions and millions and millions of lire extra.
I'm sure he didn't cost millions of lira.
There's one thing I'd like to say also in response to this question. When I interviewed Cameron Mitchell for my book, he told me that despite how beautiful this film looks, there was no real, camera devices used. The dolly shot that you see, or the dolly shots that you see throughout the film, were actually accomplished with a child's red wagon. So the means by which the film was made were actually much less than the finished product suggests.
Bava has been on record as saying that he felt that in Black Sunday was really the only picture in which he had the right kind of equipment to make a film, and on all the other films everything was kind of improvised and cobbled together, and it's remarkable how sort of slick they look, considering that they're sort of basically put together from spit and glue. Another question?
Is there any plan to make a video out of these movies?
Well, this particular picture, I think, is in public domain now, which makes it not particularly attractive for any reputable company. It's out on Sinister Cinema, which is a label that specializes in public domain material. And their transfers are usually from 16 millimeter. In fact, parts of this print, I think, were used for their tape of it. In general, you have to look in the more obscure spots for these particular pictures, because very few of them, with the exception of the AIP pictures, which were out on HBO Home Video. Interestingly, the track on the video version of Planet of the Vampires is a different soundtrack than the one you heard here. For some reason, when the rights were being negotiated to a bunch of AIP pictures in the 60s, they neglected to foresee that there would be any cassettes, and so they didn't buy the rights to them. So it's one of several pictures that has been issued with the same vocal track, but with a sort of a semi-cheesy synthesizer score that was done very quickly. One guy, I think, did several of these scores in a couple of days, and it's although I haven't seen it, but I've heard that score actually works okay with this particular picture, unlike some of the others, particularly Michael Reeves' Conqueror Worm, which is a picture that was largely dependent on its score, and the video version, it's got some synthesizer nonsense on it instead. Well, I think you can. Yeah, it's common in Italy, I think, to.
At least it was. I don't know whether it's.
I don't know if they still do it this way, but they used to shoot a guide track with no intention of using it, often because the actors are sometimes speaking different languages.
Yeah.
There's a joke about that in Truffaut's Day for Night, where he tells Valentina Cortese to just say numbers, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's allegedly something that Fellini said to somebody once.
Yeah.
They did record tracks, but very frequently the actors were speaking phonetically, and it would be planned to dub the picture anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as for what market it was made for, basically the drive-in exploitation market in America. Well, they were made for worldwide markets. This picture was a co-production of several countries, as many of these films are, and they all have partners, and the pictures are sometimes tailored for individual markets, depending on who the partners are. But I don't think anybody expected that these films were going to play in art theaters. I think they were basically considered bread and butter commercial pictures. Well, you see that this film and Black Sunday, I think, are credited to Lee Kressel, who was a guy who used to run a dubbing studio in, I think, New York, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Paul, in it, this picture has a lot of characters, and it's sort of frowned upon to hire lots of different actors and pay them all. So Paul Frees, being very versatile, they said, well, why don't you do several of these guys? I don't know that they ever imagined that he would be able to do 5 different characters, which is what he does in this picture. And there are several scenes where he's talking to himself, and there are 3 people on the screen, and it's all Paul Frees doing different voices, which when if you get into it, gets to be pretty interesting. Then if I need that thing I was going to read, which I lost.
What'd you say?
That thing I was going to read, but I lost.
Oh, you lost it?
Yeah. We're very in control here. I'm sure you have one there somewhere.
Hold on a second. Let me see.
Well, Dennis is going to get that. We'll take another question. Well, he did, to the extent that when I made my first picture. Hi, I just wanted to introduce the clip you're going to see. It's about a 10-minute clip from a picture called The Evil Eye, which was made under the title The Girl Who Knew Too Much by Bava in 1962, I think. It was an Italian-American co-production with AIP, and it exists in 2 different versions. There's the American version, which has apparently some scenes that AIP thought would be nice to have in the picture. And there were some other scenes that apparently they thought would not be too nice to have in the picture. So I've never seen the original Italian version, which I'm sure is somewhat less humorous than this one. The only reason I wanted to set this up is because the actress Letitia Roman is staying with her invalid aunt, and a bunch of strange things happen in Italy. But there's a photo on the wall of her room that behaves strangely, and it's actually a photo of Mario, so you can get to see what he looked like. And if in case I don't come back after the clip, the Print a Kill Baby Kill, which is the Italian export version of the picture. It has Italian titles, but the rest of it's in English. I think it's probably a little bit longer than the version that was released in America. And in fact, this print came from Germany, and on the box, the title is The Dead Eyes of Dr. Dracula, which has absolutely nothing to do with what the movie's about, nor does, frankly, the title Kill Baby Kill, or Operation Fear, which is the title that you'll see on the screen in Italian. It was also known as Curse of the Living Dead, and numerous other titles, probably none of which had anything to do with the story. But it's actually one of the better pictures of this weekend, and extremely rare to find. The print is a little contrasty because it's off a new negative, but it's not something you're going to see anywhere unless you live in a drive-in in some swamp in the South where they may have some old print with scratches that they're going to run. Anyway, here's the clip. Throughout the weekend, we've seen every movie Mario Bava's ever made, I guess. I don't know if anybody can say that, but except maybe Lamberto. And also we have with us the star of The Evil Eye, who's only in this one with one scene for a very brief time, but he's actually in the movie for a lot longer. You know him from such pictures as, Rock Pretty Baby was the first picture I saw him in, but that sort of dates me, I guess. He's been in The Electric Horseman and Enter the Dragon, and currently is in Beverly Hills Cop 3, which, oddly enough, I'm also in, but of course he has a bigger part. John Saxon.
Well, watching that clip and just the portion of it, actually, I came a few moments late. I'm really pleased to be here because I think I really, really need to rediscover Mario Bava because I did work with him, but I'm not really familiar with all of his work and the bravura of that scene, although this was... I'll tell you how this happened, which is the only story of some depth or some substance that concerns my having done this film and got to know him a little bit. in April of 1962. I was laying in bed looking at the ceiling, wondering where my career was going to go, where it was going to take me, where I was going to take it. I had spent 7.5 or 8 years under contract at Universal, which had expired, I think, in December of that year. And while I was staring at the ceiling, the phone rang. And it was Letizia Roman, whom I had known for a while in the circle of Italian people here in Los Angeles. And very excitedly, as you can see from her sense of delivery in this thing, she said, "John, do you want to go to Italy and make an art film?" I thought, oh, God, this is just, yeah, sure. She said, "I will call you right back." Boom. And I waited by that phone for I don't remember how long. And sure enough, she called back and said, "It's all set. They can only afford X for the 2 main roles. 50% for you, 50% for me." There was a pause. She said, "What's the matter?" I didn't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, but I did have to say, "Well, Letizia, I've done a lot of films and so on." "Yes." I said, "Well, all right, 55 for you, 45 for me." I said, "Okay." Well, she had got me a film, an art film in Italy, I thought. A week or so later, I got the script. Well, I wasn't sure. It wasn't an art film, exactly. And who was this director? I didn't know. But, as I said, I was looking for a new avenue for my career, and perhaps going to Italy and working there would be it. When I arrived, I found it was wonderful, 1962 in Italy, Rome. It was really the Dolce Vita at its apex. And it was an experience starting filming, because it was the first Italian film I had worked on. And I met Mario Bava, who, from the start, treated me in 2 different, very extreme fashions. He was very like an uncle, avuncular. And then suddenly his mood would change, and he would react to me in ways that I could never understand. Really sharply or something, But it always alternated back and forth. But besides that, I saw things that I'd never seen on production. I mean, he got angry with a production manager one day and left. I never thought director could do this in America, He just left, went home. So we all went home. A few days later, we finished shooting a day's work and half day. And there wasn't a production manager to come to suggest there was a new scene and a new set. No, we just went home. I was having the time of my life. It was summer in Rome. I was really enjoying myself a great deal. But there were a lot of strange things with Italian production that I began to sense. I mean, Letizia kept saying things every once in a while. "Don't speak." I said, "Why?" She says, "He's a spy for the production." I said, "Who? Why?" But I later came to find out why and who and all of this kind of stuff. But the film ended, and I was invited to the producer's home on the island of Elba. And, there was one incident that occurred, I remember, on the beach with Mario that was really strange. We were doing a scene on the beach here. Maybe you haven't seen this anyway. So I saw there was a mat, and it was a kind of a gymnast mat. So I started doing some judo falls and things. And he suddenly said, "Vedi, deve dimostrare che sa lo judo." And I thought, well, that's a sharp comment. Look, he has to show everybody and show off that he knows judo. And I thought, where is that coming from? What has that got to do with anything, Anyway, I go to Elba with the producer, and I took an actress friend, an English actress friend, and we had a wonderful time. And one night, everybody retired except the producer and myself, and we were drinking cognac or something. And he was telling me, starting to confess to me his problems of being an Italian producer, how it was difficult for him to get the American actors he wanted. The agents didn't take him seriously, and so on and so forth. He said, for example, in your case, he said, after all, if you hadn't been in love with Letizia, we would have never got you. I said, wait a minute, what are you talking about? He says, well, she told us that you were in love with her, and if we hired her, you'd come along on this job. Which is why I suddenly found out what Mario Bava was all about on this thing. He had a crush on Letizia, and he viewed me as the rival, and I had no inkling of what he was talking about or doing with all these things. And I just, kept reacting with bewilderment. So I don't know if that's a story about Mario per se, or about how to advance your career, or about my naivete or anything, but I did realize that Mario really lived in a world a little bit, for the few things I can remember, where his beliefs, he was very superstitious, and he believed many of the things that I think he did or showed in his films, a sense of I don't know, the uncanny and superstition and things. I can only recall seeing him one time after finishing this film, which was in 1963. I returned to Rome to work on another Italian film, and he took me to lunch on the island on the Tiber. I guess it's called Tiberina, and with his son, who I now understand is a director,
yeah, following in his father's footsteps.
What is his name?
Lamberto, and he makes horror pictures.
He makes horror pictures. Well, his son was a kid, I think, at that time. It was 1963, and I think that's the last time I saw Mario. And well, that's my favorite recollection of having worked with Mario Bava. So, if there's anything further I can add.
Were you aware at the time of the American side of the company with AIP?
I don't think AIP was involved at the time. I think they bought the film or bought into it after it was made.
Well, actually, there's a couple of different versions of it.
No, it may be. I wasn't sure. I don't think the film got any particular had any particular success here. It wasn't really, as I came to understand, his thing. It was a comedy, a spoof on horror films. I'm not really that familiar, but I gather he's really was a master of the real otherworldly, uncanny kind of things. And this was more a takeoff on it. Right?
This is a lot lighter than a lot of his pictures. It's visually, though, it's quite striking.
That's what struck me when I was
in
watching.
One of the original reviews that I read when the picture came out from Europe, and I don't know if it was of this version, that the reviewer postulated that the movie was actually a series of dreams that the lead character was having about losing her virginity after smoking doped cigarettes. And there is a scene in the American version early on where she sits next to a guy on a plane who offers her cigarettes and then is arrested at customs for some unknown reason.
Gee, I don't remember.
And she's consistently smoking these things and sort of putting them out and going, it's so strange. And it always precedes one of her strange adventures.
Right, I do. Yeah.
I don't know how that fits into the original version or not.
I don't know either.
Tim, can you put these two pictures in some sort of perspective?
Yeah, the Evil Eye, which is the American version, is more comic than the original. The Girl Who Knew Too Much.
That was the title. La ragazza che sapeva troppo. Yeah, The Girl Who Knew Too Much. Which is a takeoff on The Man Who Knew Too Much, right? The Hitchcock thing?
It sounds like a parody, but actually the original Italian version is a straight film, and it differs in quite a few ways from this version. For one thing, it had an actual theme song by the Italian pop star Adriano Celentano, which sounds a lot like Town Without Pity, actually. And the allusions to drugs are much more upfront. You can clearly hear the customs officials say marijuana when they seize the cigarettes. And there's a completely different ending on the picture.
I didn't know that. So AIP, well then, I don't know whether AIP, as I...
Well, it's a co-production. I think they co-financed it, so they wanted their own version.
That was news to me.
Why would they tell you?
Why would they tell me?
Actually,
Letizia didn't tell me. No.
The Italian version ending is actually the comic point in that version. This version ends with John telling Letizia that he'll only marry her if she puts her murder mysteries away, and they can live happily ever after. They witness a murder, and she confesses that she didn't see anything, and so they live happily ever after. The Italian version ends with them realizing that the cigarettes are marijuana, and she sort of throws them triumphantly away, and the camera follows the pack of cigarettes into the gutter, where a seminary student is passing by, picks them up, and walks away.
Oh, Mario did have a sense of humor. Valentina Cortese was in this film.
Yes, yes.
And I'm not
It is
sure.
actually the villain, I think.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if another very, very well-known Italian actor. I'm not sure. Leopoldo Trieste, is he in this? Or
Yes.
am I dreaming?
Yes, I think he is.
Maybe I don't know if I smoked anything there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, the reason they didn't tell you, they didn't want you to know that it was
I might have got-
co-financed by
might have got
IP,
more money. Mm.
was because they didn't want you to know it was going to play second feature with Man of the X-Ray Eyes.
Well, the only time I ever saw this film was on Hollywood Boulevard, very briefly at one of the theaters for a short while. I guess it had no life of its own.
Well, it didn't have a lot of indoor life, but it had a lot of outdoor life. It was a drive-in movie. I mean,
Was
there
it?
was a lot of drive-ins, and they were at that time existing on this kind of picture.
Oh, okay.
I should also point out, too, that we were talking yesterday about Blood and Black Lace being the first of the Giallo films. That's simply because it was the first one in color. But this film, Evil Eye, is actually the blueprint for the genre. It's the first. It's interesting, too, that it's a murder mystery about the effect of murder mysteries. And so this really was the foundation of a genre that is peculiar to Italy and exists and thrives to this day.
And peculiar wherever it is, actually. Do you want to say anything about Kill Baby Kill before we...
Oh, yeah. Kill Baby Kill is a great movie. It's probably my personal favorite of Bava's films. It's his most original work, and it's an extremely metaphysical little movie. There are long passages in the picture where logic and time and space go completely out the window. If any of you happen to see the last episode of David Lynch's series Twin Peaks, you'll notice that a whole chunk of that was a remake of a scene from this picture. And it's a scary little film that influenced Federico Fellini, among others. Who
Really? What other films do you feel that he influenced, either in Italy or
Well,
besides the one you
he
mentioned?
definitely influenced the Toby Dammit section of the Spirits of the Dead. Is that the name of the picture? It's a 3 Edgar Allan Poe pictures directed by Italian directors. And in fact, I think originally when they went to Fellini, he said, "Well, no, you should get Bava. He does this stuff, you know." And his episode is actually quite a bit like some of the material in this particular picture. Any questions for anybody, or any answers, or any rags, any bones?
Well, I was just thinking about that, actually, in my own question, wondering if he had any influence on Dario Argento. My work in Tenebre, whatever it was, and everybody was on the set, including Dario, trying to say, which way is it pronounced, Tenebre or Tenebre? Tenebre or Tenebre? Nobody knew. I assure you, that's true. But it was a brief cameo, my role. I don't know. I only had heard, by now, I had heard, more about him than I had heard about Bava preceding working with him. But I don't know. I mean, your question is there any similarity? Dario also seemed a very, very odd guy. For perhaps different reasons. I don't know. And we got along very well. So, I mean, it was pleasant. And I think I worked on it a week, is all. That was it. And so I really can't say. I understand that he engaged in a lot of bloody stuff. I mean, not only violent, but bloody scenes. I think with a lot of mayhem and stuff like that. I haven't seen them, so I really can't tell or speak about them very much. But I mean, the whole horror thing is interesting because I keep wondering, having subsequently been in like Nightmare on Elm Street, and in fact, I think we're going to do another. It looks that way to me, and that I'll be in it. It's really interesting to see the evolution and where horror films are going or will go. To me, I'm kind of curious about it. 'Cause something something new, or it's got to happen. I mean, you know, we don't get scared by the things that we used to get scared by. You know, we just grow out of them as a result of having seen them, which is, I suppose, a little bit like this film. You know, we react to what we already have digested, either in reading or in movies. And once that's done, you got to go on to something new.
One more question, and then we'll get on with the movie.
Tim, have
Yeah.
you seen every movie by Bava? And if so, were there some that you could only see on tape? Did you have to travel anywhere to see any of them?
Well, thanks to the post office, I didn't have to travel much to see everything, but I did have to get a lot of tapes converted from foreign standards to American standards. A lot of them, well, not a lot of them, but some of them I haven't seen really under the best conditions, pan and scan tape copies and so on. But I now have seen everything that he directed, and I've seen most of what he did as a cameraman. So I've seen enough to be able to discern the evolution of his talent. Films before he really began to evolve a visual style, and then the ones that followed. So I think I'll be able to chart it properly in the book.
Is a list available of those that you can get in warehouse or
On
music,
video?
whatever,
Well, actually, there's a list which I guess Dallas can give you of his entire output that we did on Friday, and Tim can
So the ones that are
send you.
available here?
Tim can set you straight
Great.
about all this
That'd
stuff.
be
And in
good.
fact, he wants to interview you for his book. So don't turn him down because we're in front of all these people.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you, John.
Thank
It
you.
was great to see you. And Tim, and thank you. And I hope you like the picture. It really is quite unusual, this movie. So thanks a lot.